Thank you for coming to tonight's Find Your Fit webinar. It's 7 o'clock now, and I'll give people a minute or two here to log in. Uh, I am Mary Pat O'Neill, and I am a local independent college counselor. I volunteer my time with the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. I'm very proud to be affiliated with them. And I created the Find Your Fit program a number of years ago. And tonight I am being joined by Nicole Edward. Nicole, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Mary Pat. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. And thank you, Mary Pat, for inviting me to talk about this very important topic. My background is in human resources with a primary focus on recruiting and staffing over the years, ranging from large international companies down to startups and everything in between that. I've done everything from executive search recruiting to college and MBA recruiting. And during the pandemic, I had the opportunity to work with my own daughter during her internship search and rekindled my passion for really helping people find their passions. And in the midst of that, I was watching so many young people really struggle to figure out what they wanted to do next. And then having two kids myself, both Eastlake High School graduates, go through the college process. One went to a very small liberal arts college, and the other one is still attending and soon to graduate from a large public university. Seeing how those experiences really vary and the parents' expectations vary and the resources vary. So that's why I decided to become a certified career coach and focus on working with young people.
And Nicole we know each other in the community, and she had come up with me a while ago and said, "Hey, I would love to do something with you." And I love having conversations with people, so that is how tonight's. I always say it's not a find your fit if my Zoom doesn't click out. Here we go. Hopefully this is the last time. Um, anyways, and similar to Nicole, just a little background on me. I also have two children. Mine are older. They're both been out of college, high school for a while, and both went to Eastlake also. So Nicole and I both are very familiar with Eastlake as a high school. Anyway, so for tonight, this is what I call a conversational format. We have a structure. We obviously have slides and things like that, but it is more of a conversation. And Nicole, I don't necessarily know 100% what each other is going to be saying. We might have a little difference of opinion. We might have different viewpoints, and that's awesome, which I like actually, better than just having to look at my face on Zoom. So, anyways, this webinar is being recorded. The recording will be sent out by the Lake Washington Schools Foundation, not by me, not by Nicole, but by the foundation to everyone who registered. However, this is not done instantaneously. Give them about a week. There will be resources that are included, and we are also including the slides. And any of you who have watched Find Your Fit presentations know I don't often do that. So um, I'm feeling very generous today. And we will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. I don't multitask very well, so I need to I need to focus on the presentation.
I'm with you on that one.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to set a real quick foundation here so that you have a sense as to why we are doing this session tonight. And I'm excited because Find Your Fit hasn't done this before. Um, so when a high school student is applying to college, there are five possible things that a college in the United States will ask for. High school transcript, that's always asked for. Standardized test scores, that's the ACT or SAT. High school activities, letters of recommendation, and then essays. And tonight's focus is on the high school activities portion of the college application. So basically, colleges want to know, how does a student spend their time when they're not in school and they're not doing homework? And this list begins in ninth grade. Um, Typically, colleges want to know the hours per week, the weeks per year. And I always encourage students when I'm working with them, colleges prefer depth to width. Okay. And I also want to say, obviously, we're going to be talking about more career-oriented activities. This does not mean that all of a student's activities need to be career-oriented. Do your sports, do the things that bring you joy. But I do think it is a good idea, and we're going to talk more about it. Now, parents, students, we all know no teen enjoys the question, what do you want to do when you grow up? I think that's the worst question, unless till when they're, like late 20s and you're asking when they're going to get married and when they're going to have babies for you. But for teenagers, this is a question that they hate. And Nicole and I both understand that. No one likes that question.
Honestly, I think it's just an outdated question. I think we need to refocus on what young people should be thinking about. And it's really, what are you interested in? What do you want to pursue next?
Right,
What path do you want to go down? Realizing that the path is filled with twists and turns.
right. And also, are there problems in the world that you want to be part of the solution for? Yes, I agree with you. However, that question is how most people ask the question, and
I know.
people mean well when they ask the question. So when a high school senior is applying to college, on the college application, there can be different ways that a college handles the college major. They typically will ask, what is your first choice major? What is your second choice major? Do you have a minor in mind? But many colleges admit direct to major, which means the high school senior is directly placed into a major. Sometimes colleges do pre-majors, which means, oh, you're pre-business, pre-computer science, pre-biology, whatever. And then some colleges allow students to be undecided or undeclared. What has been happening is that many to most US colleges now admit by major or consider the college major in the admissions process. So even if they don't admit, they want to know, you know, oh, is it computer science? Is it business? Is it engineering? Is it biology? Is it, whatever, because they have to plan for that. And this is, I guess, what started us in talking about this conversation tonight and planning this webinar is because of this, how colleges do it. However, there are many other reasons, and Nicole, when I'm done with my list, anything you want to add, please do, that I see why it can be so beneficial for high school students to have an idea of a direction. And you'll probably say this too later, Nicole. We want everybody to understand this is not set in cement, that it's this rigid path that students have to have their whole lives figured out. Teenagers, the frontal lobe of their brain is not formed yet. So I understand, there can be some shifts, some changes, but I think a direction can be very helpful. I know with my oldest daughter, she was my biology kid. I could have told you that when she was in fifth grade that she was all about science. And she did study biology. But then when she was in her undergraduate program, she took classes in immunology and epidemiology. And she was doing service work at the time. And that all blended together to lead her to get her master's in public health. So just know that it's not like you must do this, but here are some of the reasons that I think it can be very helpful for students to have an idea of a direction. One, when they're picking their high school classes, it focuses them and they have a better idea of what classes to take. When they're creating a college list, not all colleges offer every college major. And so if they have a direction, then they can research that specific major. They can make sure that they're only applying to colleges that offer that major. They're more likely to graduate on time because they're going in with a plan and they have done things properly. They can be a more competitive applicant in the college process because they have this experience, because they can prove to colleges that they know that what they want to do. It motivates them often because they're excited and they want to do things and they're not scared about it. They learn new skills. I think it lessens a student's anxiety quite a bit. And you know, there's a lot of anxious teenagers out there, I can say. And I also think it's really fun. Nicole, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think at least in my circles of people I know, there's still a misconception about what it really means to explore in college. And so if you're thinking that you're going to get to college and have the world is your oyster in terms of class selection and in terms of timing and in terms of really figuring it out, it doesn't really work that way. So if you really want to explore different opportunities, by the time you get through some of your prereqs on your guesstimated major, or you get through just the standard things that freshmen take in college, it gets to be a point where you're feeling the pressure and the too lateness to explore multiple classes, and you may not even qualify to enroll in those classes.
Hmm.
So having some of that groundwork done before you get there provides you with the opportunity to actually understand what you might want to explore, if that makes sense. I just
Yeah.
think people are confused about the timing on that. And then sometimes what happens is by the time you really take those classes and you realize you don't like those classes, that's when you're backpedaling and switching and having to do all the prereqs for the new major. So I
Hmm.
think really doing some just general exploring before you get there. And you don't have to say the specific career you want, but having some general interest ideas at least gives you some direction to hone in.
Yeah, and the other thing too is I mentioned that a number of colleges are doing more direct freshman admission to the
Yes,
major. And that typically means that there's not a lot of space for other students to come in. So if you're not accepted as
right,
a freshman into this major, you're kind of out of luck. And I know sometimes, especially in the last couple of years with computer science, which has been very popular, sometimes students think, oh, I'll just go in as a, I don't know, creative writing major or something, and then I'll,
right.
I'll transfer in, and that's not usually an option. So,
Well, even with classes like economics, if you're not an economics major and you want to explore that later on, it's very difficult because they let their pre-major admins in first.
right.
And so, and like you said, they're all planning. And the same thing with CS. It's very difficult to just take taster courses, if you will, if you're not in that major.
Yeah. Okay, so just to give a little heads up to the four most selective and popular majors currently right now, computer science, no surprise, engineering, business, and nursing. And, I've worked with a lot of families over the years, and sometimes a parent, 'cause I always ask if a student has a direction that they want to go. And sometimes parents say, oh, they're a STEM major. And I understand that. However, STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And in science alone, there can be, I don't know, 13 different majors a student can go into. Technology has about six. Engineering can have 16 that I can think of. Mathematics is four. So that's what, 39 possible paths that a student can go into. Business, I can think of at least 10 different majors in a business school. So don't think, oh, well, we're set. We know it's STEM. So anyway, anything you want to say there, Nicole?
No, that's pretty accurate.
Okay. And I often joke, I'm an old lady, and I am. And things have changed a lot. I don't know, Nicole, how it was when you were in college, but back in my day, you went to and you had more of that exploratory type of a thing.
Yes.
And you didn't pick your major till the end of sophomore year, and you went in and you filled out some form and they said welcome, but whatever, it wasn't a big deal. Um, but it is very different now. And so Nicole and we encourage parents to guide students with with this process, because one of the things I'll tell you, some of the things we're going to talk about tonight and our suggestions scares kids. Remember, they can be anxious, they can be nervous, and that's all understandable. And for parents to guide, because once your child is in college, your ability to guide is a lot less. I can tell you with two kids, Nicole's got them too. So this is a chance for a parent to provide guidance, wisdom, support. Don't control it. But anyways, anything there, Nicole?
Yeah, and not to overwhelm. That is not the purpose
Yes.
of my statement here. So don't panic. But in the past, entry level jobs were entry level. They're really not anymore. And so If you go through a job search post-college, you'll notice that most of the jobs require some level of experience. Experience doesn't mean they have to have 40-hour work, 60-hour work week experience. It does mean that they have to have the skills necessary to do the job. Academics alone will not do that in college. You have to create your own experience. And so by starting earlier to explore those careers, you're able to, as a student, have an idea of what types of internships you want to pursue in college and what types of part-time jobs, what types of clubs, so that you can build your experience so that when you graduate, you are career ready rather than just having a degree alone.
Yeah, and the same thing is true for high school graduates who have some, again, I don't expect that people will have had a full-time, you know, jobs and all this stuff, but the experience that students can get and the exposure to industries and things like that
Right.
can help strengthen a college application quite substantially. Okay, so um, this is mostly going to be Nicole. I'll be leading the questions, but we're going to be talking about um, self-assessment and exploration, how to get experience, using the resources at school. We're going to talk about networking, and we're going to talk about research. Um, and part of this, and this has been something I remember learning in my 20s. So part of this process, it's not like Nicole, you had mentioned this, life is not necessarily linear. This process may not be linear. Like, oh, I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this, and I'm going to find my perfect outcome. Now, there's going to be things that a student goes, oh my gosh, I have learned I don't ever want to do that. And that's something to celebrate because the more somebody realizes what they don't want to do, it narrows down what they do want to do. So just know
Right.
that there's going to be some of these are going to be duds, where a student tries it and says, check, please. But these are very vital learning experiences. So, okay, Nicole, let's talk about how can high school students learn more about what interests them? How can parents help support
Sure.
um, this area?
Okay. Well, there's, first of all, I want to say that there are a lot of free resources out there available. I will tell you that your child sitting alone in their bedroom thinking about what they want to do isn't going to cut it. That is, there is not going to be a big epiphany that way. And so you do have to put in some work in thinking about reflecting on your personal interests. Okay, what do I like to do? What aspects of classroom work have I enjoyed? Do I like presenting in front of people? Do I like certain subjects? There are free career aptitude tests available out there that measure both personality as well as interests. I definitely recommend doing those. I know they're going to be in the resources, but they give you an idea. They're not going to say, oh my gosh, all roads point to
Mhm.
this. But what they're going to do is give you some bones. You can start looking, you can think, oh, I never thought about that. What is that career? You can explore, there's this website called Onet. I love that website. And the reason I really like that one is that it makes it super easy. You go through the interest profiler and then it gives you kind of what you're gravitating towards. But it gives you 5 different levels of career opportunities. So if you don't want to go to college, it gives you options for what you could do if you don't want to go to college. If you want to go on and get a PhD, it shows you what a career path could look like with your particular interest levels. Any
That's
questions?
great. And I was just going to say, I a student that I was working with, and I understand this as parents. I think we all feel pretty comfortable. We want our children to, when they're done with their education, to be able to go into the workforce, provide for themselves, maybe get off our cell phone plan, who knows, but they're adults and they're self-sufficient. I think and so that's why as parents, I think we often will be like, oh, well, computer science would be a great, whatever. And we'll talk more about that. But anyway, so I have this student who his parents want him to have a practical um, college major to lead to a practical career. And again, I understand that. I have to tell you, in working with this student, I it it felt very phoned in. I didn't sense a lot of uh, true interest in this, trying to make his parents happy, which a lot of kids will do that and say the words and all this stuff. But anyways, it was interesting because as I was working with him, and engineering was what he had decided on, I didn't really feel that he had explored it. But one of the things that he, in his college essays, had talked about was his love of geography. And it was, you could just tell this was a subject that the student loved and he had great and all this stuff. And I said to him, you can combine geography with engineering. And I sent him something. So, there, none of this is a one size fits all process.
Right.
And there's things you can blend together. And quite frankly, I think in almost every single field nowadays, technology is going to be part of it. And so, yes, do I think
Yes.
kids should learn some computer science? Yes, I do, because it's just part of the world that we live in. But just know it's not, this is where I don't want a parent telling their child, you will become this.
Right.
It's like, oh, wow, you get really excited watching you work on math, or when you're writing or making a presentation, you get all excited and you get so happy, like you get lost in it. And that's what we all want. Okay.
Well, and I think for parents to point that out, it's good because I think sometimes when you are happy and content doing something, you don't recognize it, right?
Right.
So I think somebody else pointing out or thinking about things that you get compliments on.
Yeah.
What have you done at work where somebody pointed out a strength? And,
hmm
at the time, it goes over your head. You don't even acknowledge it. But in reflecting, that kind of points out your strengths as far as what you're,
Well,
good
and
at.
I find, and I think this is true for everybody, the things that we're good at, we take for granted
Yes,
because, like, I know I'll be like, what, can't everybody do that? And no,
right.
they can't. So, yeah, so pointing things out, or, and if maybe if your child doesn't, because often as they do get older as teenagers, parents are the last person that they really
Right.
want to hear information from, but perhaps another relative or a teacher or somebody, family friend, just to pass it along, because it is important, because I think we overlook what we are good at. Okay, so
Yes.
how can stu okay, so if a student has an idea, well, maybe I'm interested in whatever, how can they explore, get some experience in it?
Yeah, I think there's such a difference between reading about something and actually seeing it play out. So back when you and I were kids, we probably still had career day at school. I don't know if they still do that, but really talking to people and learning about what they do. So scheduling a coffee chat, having an
Mhm,
informational interview, which I know we'll talk about later, and shadowing people. So going and sitting with someone who actually does a job that you might be potentially interested in. First of all, you learn a lot. You
mhm,
learn certainly about how many aspects of the job are boring because I think sometimes people assume the whole day is filled with excitement. But you learn what it's like to have that job. Um, you can also use that on a resume. So
mhm.
that actually qualifies as experience. You can get an
Yeah.
internship, and we'll talk about what that means, what an internship is, summer employment, part-time jobs, creating things through freelancing. So
Mhm,
if you're interested in doing a blog, if you are interested in developing video games, all of that counts as experience. You
mhm,
certainly have to know how to position that and how to create your own portfolio. But all of that counts as experience. And there's a lot of high schoolers that are very creative and that create all of these things. And if you capture it and understand that that qualifies, I think it's really powerful. And then certainly, I know that most high schoolers, at least when my kids were there, they were required to do volunteer work, and your college applications require you to do volunteer work. So you may as well volunteer in community projects and organizations where you're interested in because it's
mhm.
two birds with one stone. You get to figure out if you like it, you get exposure, and you get experience.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more, but I believe that job shadowing is very important. And I often have teens tell me, "Well, I want to become a doctor." And I don't care what the student tells me. Anytime a student says to me, "I want to be XYZ," I just simply say, "Okay, can you tell me how you know that?" And oftentimes it can be because of TV shows that they
Right.
watch. And that is not going to cut it because, I once did an informational interview with an FBI agent with one of my students, and the man was saying, he goes, I know you think this is like TV. Trust me, that's not how my life
Right.
usually works.
Yeah.
But like, but like in pre-med, oh my God, the statistics are crazy. It's something like of all the college freshmen who start first year and say, I'm going to be a doctor, only 47% of them actually end up taking the MCAT, which is the test that they need to take in order to qualify for medical school. And
Right.
then of the students who take the MCAT, only 40% of those get into a medical school. So there's these huge drop-offs. And then you've got those kids, who are then like, oh, now I don't know what I want to do. So, but
Right.
job shadowing, I just think is vitally important. So I just want to talk a little bit more in depth, and Nicole, you can add anything that you want, but I strongly recommend that students, when I'm working with them, to do informational interviews. And part of it is because teenagers, let's face it, they really don't have a clue of what the day-to-day of what somebody does. And as I said, this is scary. Okay. Like if I were to tell one of my kids in 10th grade, oh, you should do some informational interviews, they'd panic. Okay. But this is an area where parents should absolutely help
Yeah.
their teens and are such a great resource. So and you know, again, this is exploratory. Just because your child says, I might be interested in, I don't know, I don't want to name any topics, and then somebody goes, is that bad? But I will tell you that sometimes parents panic at the mention of certain ones. Let's call it major blue. Okay, let's call it a color. Anyways, don't be like, you can't be that, blah, 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 blah. Like, no, just let them explore, whatever. Anyways, and this is where parents can reach out to their, all the people that they know, put it on social media. Hey, Nicole's interested in studying blue. Does anybody know anybody who studies blue?
Right.
And people will reach out. Now, it could be perhaps I am a blue studier, okay? And I might say, well, Nicole, my sweet daughter, why don't you talk to mama? And let me tell you, I am the last person my child should talk to, especially teenagers. Too close, too close. You should find somebody that you admire and all that. Have them talk to you. It's just a 100% different experience. Okay, so nothing against parents. It's just with teens, it's not the best idea. Anyways, and the thing that teens don't understand, most adults are thrilled that
Right.
somebody asked them. Now, it's not like you're going to say, "Hey, can I have 2 hours of your time?" But and we're going to talk about other interviews that parents should not be in. I'm fine, especially for maybe the first one or two, so that your child can understand how this goes. But, to reach out and say, hey, can 15 minutes of your time, we'll meet you for coffee or do a, Zoom Teams, whatever, Google, whatever, and keep it to 15 minutes. And then as you're getting maybe at 10 minutes, if the conversation's going well, you can say, do you need to go? I mean, be very respectful of people's time, but truly, most adults are like, really? Somebody's interested in what I do? All of you parents out there think if somebody asked to talk to you, you'd probably be like, absolutely. I do it all the time. Now, in the resources, I'm going to have a list of questions, but I can tell you some of them. And Nicole, if you have others, let me know. But just simply, obviously you can do research, and Nicole's going to talk about how to research industries and things like that. But just some basic questions. Can you tell me, how did you get from my age to where you are now? Listen to their story. Did you go to college? What was your bachelor degree in? Where did you go? What was your major? Did you get a graduate degree? Knowing everything you know now, would you take that same path, or would you do it differently? What type of problems do you solve in your job? What's your favorite part of what you do? What's your least favorite? Everybody has one. What kind of changes are you seeing in the industry? Is there anything, I should be aware of? What advice do you have for somebody my age? And again, just listen to the answers, write it down. And then where this can lead. So if your child really likes connects you, and you can always tell when you're connecting with somebody. That's when they could say, would it be possible for me to job shadow you sometime? And all shadowing means is that the student sits and observes quietly, writes down questions, maybe talks about it afterwards, like, for an hour or two. Um, and if the person says yes and they do it, one of two things will happen. They'll either think this was the most amazing thing in the world, and then we'll lead us to the next step, or they're going to say, not for me, okay, and then still be polite. But if they loved it, that's when they could say, you know what, over the summer, I have, I don't know, 10 hours a week. I'd be gladly give to you to do anything, any project. I found this so fascinating. They don't have to pay. At this point for the early stage, I don't care about money at all. It's more the experience. But that's how internships can be created. I know people put a lot of pressure, make them all fancy, but that's all you have to do. So, Nicole, do you have anything you want to add to what I just said there?
The only thing I would add really is that in that conversation, and I know we keep talking about how things have changed, but everything is really dynamic in the working world right now. And what's hot today may not be hot 3 years from now. And I think there's a value to hearing someone's story and then asking their perspective, not only of about what they would do differently and what advice they have, but what changes they've noticed in people early in career in that field.
Oh, that's a
What does
good
that
question.
look like?
Yeah.
And are there people that that were recently brought on in the last couple of years that you think might be willing to chat with me? Because their experience launching into that field will be very different than
Hmm.
that person that took that path there.
Yeah.
And I think there's value to that because I think part of the challenge that we have with early in career, people want to go from A to Z and not do any of the middle work.
Yes. Yeah.
And they get in the career and they're like, I hate this job because they don't realize that it takes time to get
Hmm.
to Z and you have to earn your stripes
Yeah.
to get to Z. And so I think there's value in talking to people in different stages of the career.
That's a very good point. And I know you'll talk a little bit more about the internship, but keeping in mind, this is for high school students.
Yes, I understand.
No, 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 not you. I'm
Oh,
saying to the
oh,
audience that to your point, because sometimes students will be like, oh, well, I was just, answering phones or, filing, whatever. You're not even, if you are interested in healthcare, you're going to be sitting at a desk telling people what hospital room somebody, like, you're not doing surgery at this point. So you hear the term, oh, I feel like I have imposter syndrome, and just remember, you're beginners. Everybody's a beginner, and you have to start somewhere, but these little things add up. So,
and the other thing I really like about the informational interviews, and I know we're talking about networking later,
mhm,
but part of the reason that it's so overwhelming and people feel like the word networking is automatically a big ick, especially teenagers, is because they don't realize it's about the genuine ability to
connection.
connect with people
Hmm.
that share similar interests. And so by doing those informational interviews and you find that you're interested in something somebody does, you now have a connection into that industry.
Hmm.
And someday, if you stay in that industry or if you continue on, you're going to be sharing information that's important to that person as well.
Hmm.
So it's a reciprocal relationship in that way.
Absolutely. Okay, so what high school resources are available for students to explore careers and
So certainly there's your AP classes, right? You've got your
Mhm.
electives that you can take. And I know you and I probably will have a different spin on some of this, but a lot of students, it's been my experience that a lot of students take AP classes because they either want the rigor for their college app or they want um, to have a certain number of AP classes or what have you.
Mhm.
And that's fine, but it'd be really nice if they could pepper in some of the ones that they're potentially interested in as well, if they don't match. So I really encourage students in high school to do that. I think it's really important to make sure that those extracurricular activities that you do, that you're interested in them and that they add some value, that you're actually getting some exposure to industry, to career types, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I always caution families that the college process, and again, what we're talking about, you do not have to go to college. There's other paths
Right.
after high school. But oftentimes it seems that families want to treat this as a transactional process. Like you're saying, I mean, I think students should be taking the AP classes that interest them.
Right.
And and you might say, well, how do I know what classes to take if I'm interested in something? Um, you can do a search and just say, what classes should a high school student take if they're interested in, and then fill in the blank, whatever the path is, and you will get lots of different resources. Again, you'll see there's usually a theme. I'll tell you, math is pretty important in a lot a lot of fields and all that. And um, like both my kids were science majors, and while they did take the AP science classes and the math classes, they didn't earn college credit. Well, they earned it, but they couldn't use the college credit because for the sciences, you always have to start at the beginning. You have to be Bio 101, Chem 101. But I will tell you, both my kids said they were super prepared for college level science classes and they didn't have any issues with grades. So that was good. Okay, let's talk about networking. What does it mean? Because as you said, a lot of people go, "Ew." And why
Yeah.
is it important, Nicole?
Well, and I think people don't realize that you're networking every day. You're just
Hmm.
not putting a label on it and you're not doing it with intention. So connecting with teachers, your community, family, if you have coaches, um, reaching out to all of those people when you're looking for the next steps and talking to them, that's networking. Attending career fairs. So when the colleges come to the school or when I'm not sure if some of the other options post high school are still coming, but go attend those classes or those sessions and understand who the people are. Ask questions. Certainly the coffee chats, that's networking.
Hmm.
But the idea of networking is really to make it effortless. And to do that, you should really start networking before you need your network. The worst thing that you can experience is when you have to have a network because then it's forced and then that's when the ick feeling
Yes,
comes.
that's the
Because then,
desperate.
yeah, then you're
Desperate.
asking for something
Right,
instead
right.
of building genuine
Yeah.
relationships. So, it doesn't have to be scary for a high schooler because they're already networking, they're already building relationships with people that they respect in their own environment. So it's just really expanding that and asking some of those people,
Hmm.
who else do you respect? Who do you think I could talk to? That's the value of those relationships.
What's interesting is when I talk with families, one of the things I talk about is the possibility that a student might need letters of recommendation from high school teachers. And I was always the kid who I like teachers, so I would always talk to them and joke around with them and all that stuff. But a lot of kids don't know how to do that. And just even learning, like you said, to network with them, to, let them know what you're doing and what you're interested about. And you might be surprised at the connections that your teachers can help you with, or if they're going to write you letters of rec, then they learn more about you that way. So,
Well, think about how many people the teachers have had over the years,
mhm.
and they stay in touch with a lot of people. And
Oh
it's,
yeah.
so you'd be surprised oftentimes whether I'm working with a high schooler or a kid in college or post college, I don't really know anybody. And then you start talking to them about who they actually know, and they say, well, they're not in that industry. Well, it doesn't necessarily matter because they
Right.
know a lot of people, and
Right.
you just
Yeah.
anybody's a valuable connection if you make the effort.
We have a family friend who I tease him all the time. I tell him he is the absolute best networker I've ever seen in my life. And he does it from such a genuine place because he likes people.
Right.
But given any situation, he has somebody to talk, like he would, but he keeps in touch with people regularly so that if he is looking for a new job or something, they don't go,
Yeah,
oh, he's just calling because he wants a job. It's, then it's genuine, like you said. It does make a
that's
difference.
right. It does make a difference, and it doesn't feel icky.
No,
So,
not at all. I mean, I still have people from, 30 plus years ago that who helped me or mentored me when I was in my early 20s and,
yeah,
still think fondly of them. Okay, so what type of tools are available for students to research careers
sure.
or paths?
Yeah. Well, certainly, we talked about going out to ONET. So that's certainly a place to do some research. And I think I mentioned before that ONET will tell you different levels of preparation for the careers, but it also gives you a career outlook for each of those
Hmm.
careers. So that's certainly one place. LinkedIn, I think most people are familiar with that, but that's a professional networking website. It's very valuable in terms of being able to find people in careers, find companies, find industries. I love Indeed. I
Hmm.
know we're including that in our references. Indeed is fabulous because they have fabulous articles about
I
each
use them
career.
all the time to send them
Yeah,
to students about different fields.
it's great, and it tells you exactly it even tells you some of the classes that you need. It
Hmm.
tells
Yep.
you what a career path could look like, what a
Hmm.
different career path, because there's a lot of different ways to get there. And
Yes.
so I love Indeed. There's also a site called The Muse, and they often have some good information. So there's a lot of different resources out there. Certainly ChatGPT, if you
Hmm.
just prompt some of the questions that you're inquiring about, it will give you answers, and in those answers, it gives you the resources. Check the resources. That's where the valuable information will be if you really want to do a deep dive into the career that you're trying to research. And so I just recommend going online, and certainly, researching through talking with people is
Yeah.
still
And
important.
YouTube has tons
Oh,
of
absolutely.
videos on what's it like to be a day in the life of whatever, or how do I become, and
Yeah.
there's wonderful content out there. So,
Well, not only that, but they do the wonderful content about the majors at the
oh
school
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
and the
College
courses
majors,
that are a
careers.
hiccup.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk more about internships. So just explain what
Okay.
I think most people
So for
know, but in case they don't.
Yeah, so for people who don't know what an internship, it's really just a temporary work opportunity. Organizations offer them. The exchange is that your student or whoever it is getting real world experience.
Mhm.
May be paid, it might not be paid. It's usually short in duration. Oftentimes it's a summer internship. It can be during the semester. It can be all year long. There's a variety of them. Again, they can be full time. Some internships are just a couple days a week, a couple hours here and there. It helps you develop industry specific skills. It helps you get exposure, helps you build a professional network, explore career interests. And while
Mhm.
you're there, I'll give you a clue. You should set up coffee chats with other people that are
Yep.
outside of your little bubble that you're working in so that you really get an idea of that industry and the company overall. Um, and what Mary Pat touched on earlier is really important. You can either apply to existing internships or you can create your own. And just through networking, you can do that. You can call people that you know and just say, I'm really looking to get more experience in this. Do you have anything I can do for
Right.
the summer?
And especially I don't know, I know I believe this. I've seen it with my own kids. You probably too, but a lot of times it's who you know. And so asking family friend or a
Yes.
relative. And one of the things that I often suggest to students if they are doing whether it be an internship or some sort of a program or volunteers, whatever it is. Let's say it's for the summer. I encourage students to keep a little log,
Yes.
not a daily thing necessarily, but especially when there's a problem that comes up. I encourage students to write down what the problem was, and then once the solution is figured out, just take a note. And it's because if you do end up applying to college or possibly to more selective internships, being able to show your critical thinking skills is very powerful. But if you don't write them down, you'll forget them because as humans, we tend to only remember the goods. Oh, yeah, that was a great internship. And I'm sure it was a great internship. But as we said, it's not linear. There's always
Right.
problems that come up. And you know, and I'm a huge believer that the only time we learn something is when things go wrong. When everything
Yes,
goes
well,
right, we don't
yeah.
learn anything as humans. So,
No, I think that's a really good point, and I recommend that all of my clients do this period. So even if it's not an internship, just in your job, because you forget what you work on, or
mhm,
even in a class when you're working on a project, that can be an experience. If you're limited in
mhm,
experience on your resume and you did an amazing project, it was a group work, you worked around a solution, all of that stuff should be documented. You've got a
mhm,
notes app on your phone. Use dictation. You don't have to even write it down, just so that you remember these things because
mhm.
you're going to have to tell stories about it someday.
Yep. Sooner than later, probably. All
Yeah.
right. So why should a student do an internship, Nicole?
Okay. So again, it's a great way to explore your interests. It's a great way to figure out what you do like. And as Mary Pat mentioned before, it's a really good way to figure out what you don't like. And at young ages, and even, gosh, when you're older, there's just as much value in learning what you don't enjoy as what you do enjoy. It makes the
Hmm.
field much smaller. Um,
Hmm.
and you leverage that experience to get the next thing.
Yes.
So, as I mentioned before, careers post college require experience. And so all of these things add up. And if you want some of those competitive internships in college, having the experience in high school means something. So
Hmm.
I think that's, certainly a compelling reason. It helps you develop some industry specific skills, although not always. Sometimes you're going to be doing things like answering the phones, but
Hmm.
you're observing, which can be very important.
And you can have those informational interviews
That's
maybe
right.
after work, and then again, because the last one here is these experiences can help strengthen a college essay. Many colleges ask the why this major prompt, and oh, well, I worked here and I got to talk to people, or, I did this project, it taught me these skills. It is, it's amazing the difference versus just going, well, I took AP Physics, so I think I want to be an engineer. I can tell you because I thought my son was going to be an engineer. And that's about, AP Calc and AP Physics,
Yeah.
and that did not make an engineer. He's
No. And my son too. I mean, he's been taking or done a variety of internships, and that's likely not what he's going to end up doing for his job. But the skills that he got out of his internships, which we'll
Mhm,
talk about later, are beneficial to what he does want to do. So
mhm,
again, these are all building blocks.
yeah. Okay, so how do they find internships, Nicole? What's the best way?
So certainly through high school and college campus resources, you've got your career center. In college, you have something called Handshake. It's the equivalent in a different way to LinkedIn, but specifically for college students. So the jobs that are specifically posted on Handshake, they are looking for entry level and for interns. Attending career fairs is a great way to get contacts about internships. Although I will caution you, the career fairs in person at the larger universities are a little bit competitive these days. So
Mhm,
I'll leave it at that. Networking is really important. Leveraging the online platforms, you've got your LinkedIn, you've got Indeed, you've got something called ZipRecruiter, Glassdoor. They all have in Google Jobs. They all have internship openings.
even for
Research.
high school students, I know because I
Yes,
see them. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yep.
Looking at company websites, you'd be surprised at how many companies do high school kinds of things, but you have to actually do the digging. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily out there. So if there's careers that you're interested in, go ahead and look at those company websites to see if they offer anything for high schoolers.
Hmm.
Again, networking effectively is a really good way to create those
Yeah.
internships and define them. And being proactive. If you're uncomfortable with the verbal conversation or with the coffee chat, send some emails. Find some people on LinkedIn, send some emails. You'd be surprised at how many people are excited about helping young people
They
with
are.
their,
And I
yeah,
always tell students the worst thing that can happen is you'll get ignored.
yeah, yep,
I get
exactly.
ignored all the time. So it's fine. And then I do
Yes.
want to say something in Seattle, there are certainly a number of highly selective internships. The Fred Hutch one, Institute for Systems Biology, Seattle Children's, Microsoft. There are some and other ones too. You know, Princeton has, like there's just all sorts of highly selective internships. And typically for these type of high school selective internships, there are essays that students have to respond to. And so, and these are very selective, and oftentimes they want to help underserved populations and things like that. But just know, and oftentimes these are only for like the summer between junior and senior year. They're typically very specific for that. But what a student does the summer before ninth grade or after ninth grade or or after 10th grade, these type of things, as Nicole said, they build up your experience so that when you are answering the questions for these internships, you have powerful answers. Because you can, I call it anecdotal proof that you can say, when I did that, and you give the
Right.
specifics and don't be afraid to talk about things that I call it with essays, showing vulnerability, the fact that you're human, but you obviously want to leave a positive feeling. But just know that these little things that you do, or like Nicole said, these activities, like informational interviews, they can go onto your high school activity list. I once had a student who was interested in engineering, and her dad set her up, and that's no problem with doing that, with women engineers. And I mentioned earlier there was something like 16 different types of engineering fields.
Right.
And he probably set her up with 10, and she did all these interviews so that she could learn about about engineering, and she was very knowledgeable, and that can go on, that makes for a strong application. So anyways, just know that even if it doesn't seem like it's very big at the beginning, they've done everything, Nicole, but they just aren't able to get an internship.
Yeah, well, if you don't get an internship, it is not the end of the world. There are a lot of other ways to get experience, like I mentioned before. So, you should do something in high school, right?
Yes.
So there's certainly the extracurricular activities. So if you have a leadership role in those activities, that counts as some experience. You
Mhm.
have some, think about challenges that come up within that role and how did you solve those challenges? Those are good talking points. Get a part-time job.
Mhm.
So many young people don't get part-time jobs anymore, and you get some really relevant
Mhm.
skills by having a job, and
Mhm.
companies are looking for that. Volunteer, again, do things that you're interested in and do something at those organizations that you can gain some experience from. Work on personal projects. I mentioned developing your own portfolio. If you're a creative type, certainly do that. If you are into coding, you know, do something with coding, create create something and keep track of it. Participate in online courses. So if you're potentially interested in CS, but you're not going to do computer science in college, there's things like Udemy,
Mhm.
Coursera, even LinkedIn Learning. You can do some of those coursework, and that way you get exposure to say, I don't like this, or I do like this. And in the meantime, you're developing transferable skills that will be good for almost every job these days. Again, we mentioned networking and shadowing people in business in the industry that you're interested in. You can certainly do that even if you don't have an internship. And lastly, I want to mention again the value in developing those transferable skills. If you focus on things like communication, teamwork, problem solving in any work environment, whether it's part-time work, leadership opportunities at school, extracurriculars, it goes a long way.
Absolutely. And I know I've worked with students who, um, you know, did some personal projects. I had one student who built a Tesla coil in his garage. I've had other students who um, wrote, a screenplay, and
Yeah,
all that type of stuff. Or they write songs, or make little movies on their phone and stuff like those all count. Again, colleges
good.
just simply want to know, how do you spend your time?
Mhm.
And again, everything does not have to be career oriented, but it it makes a difference. It truly, truly does. So, okay. So let's assume The student has applied for, this is probably a more formal internship versus one where their
Yes.
uncle set it up for them or something. But typically a student is going to have to interview. Those highly selective internships that I mentioned, there's an interview
Yeah.
process. And Nicole's going to go through things the students need to do. And one thing, we were kind of laughing about it, but I do want to make sure parents understand no parents are allowed in these type of interviews.
Yeah.
This has, you can help prepare your child, which would be
Right.
awesome, but you cannot be in the interview. So, okay,
Yeah.
go through it,
And
Nicole.
yeah, and that has actually been a trend where parents are showing up to interviews, and um, it's well intended, but it is a big no-no.
Yeah.
So preparing ahead of time is really important in an interview. Again, this is high school. I'm not expecting that somebody is doing the same level of research for an internship in high school, but understanding what the company does, understanding something recent in the news, understanding what the culture is like at a company. These are all easy things to find right online, but they go a long way in an interview. Dressing appropriately, understanding a little bit about the work culture. Certainly, there aren't that many strictly professional environments, but there are some. And understanding, at least dressing business casual if that's their environment.
And if it is a remote interview, check the background. I've had
Yes.
kids be like in their bedrooms and their beds unmade behind. I mean, again, I don't care about that, but if I was
Yeah.
an employer, I might.
Yes, yes. I mean, you do want to worry about those things. And if you are on a Zoom call, limit your distractions. Make sure that you're silencing your phone, that you try as hard as you can not to have a dog barking in the background. All those little things that are distracting, and still dress appropriately, at least within the camera range for the interview. And really understand what that camera range is too, by
Yeah.
the way. You want to make a strong first impression. Make sure that you shake hands. Make sure that you smile. Make sure that you are, showing. I'm not saying you have to pretend to be an extrovert if you're not an extrovert, but have some energy. Smile. You
Look
sound
them in
different.
the eye.
Yeah, look in the camera, look in the eyes, those kinds of things. Make sure that you're showcasing your skills. Understand what your value is and how you can bring that to the environment. So in some cases, you'll understand what they're looking for, and in other cases, you will not. If you know what they're looking for, think of ways that your child has done that in their background,
Yeah.
and
It's the
figure
anecdotal
out,
proof again. Like,
yeah,
oh,
figure out how to communicate
I did
that.
this group project and I had to handle all of this and do the presentation and whatever. So,
Exactly. And if we get to that slide, I know we're running short on time, but answering questions in the interview using the STAR method. So what is the situation? What is the task? What is the action you took? What is the result? And I always like to add, if your student can add, what did you learn from the
mhm,
experience? The growth mindset is so important in the work
mhm.
environment and even as a student now. So understanding how you grew during that experience or what you would do differently is really a valuable piece of information. Sending that thank you note, I think a lot of people have forgotten
An
about that.
email thank you note, correct?
I'm sorry,
An
an email?
email thank you
Yes.
note. Yeah.
Although if you really want to stand out, some people still do
Yes.
the
Yep.
handwritten, but at a minimum, send the email thank you note and
Mhm,
do it within 24 hours. Take
mhm.
the time to reflect how you thought the interview went so that when you do it again, you can make some
Yeah,
improvements or
sure.
adjustments. And then follow up, certainly within the interview, make sure to ask, what are next steps? And then if they say, we'll get back to you in a week, if they don't get back to you in a week, follow up. Say, I
Yeah,
just
with an
want to
email,
reiterate.
they don't have to pick up the phone and call, but they
Nope.
can.
Just follow up with an email and
Mhm,
just say, I want to reiterate my interest in the opportunity. Really enjoyed meeting with you. Could you please advise on next steps?
mhm.
So that's kind of it. I know that's a really quick and dirty on how to interview, but
And
uh,
then some of this you said, and I'm going to try to get through these so that we can go to questions, but we're almost done, so we're doing good.
yes. The one thing I didn't touch on, and I really do think it's important, is practicing interview questions. And this is where a parent can be helpful
Mhm,
if you have that kind of a relationship. I know sometimes it's tricky, but if you can practice interview questions, again, ask ChatGPT what to expect, ask Indeed what to expect in
mhm.
an interview, and use those common interview questions to think about how you would answer them ahead of time and practice them out loud. Because what
Mhm.
you do when you're doing that is that you can really condense your answer, make it crisp, make it sharp so that you don't get into a situation you're rambling.
Well, and I don't know how much they do phone interviews, but I think sometimes there's a screening process maybe with phone interview.
There is.
And I just remember when our daughter was interviewing for some things, and there was no Zoom back then. And I remember I said to her, stand up while you're doing this and have a mirror in front of you so that because when you smile, your voice changes, so
Yeah.
just simple little things like that. So again, parents can help guide their kids with that.
Yeah, and there are surprising amount of phone screens that still takes place because a lot of people are doing those phone screens on the go or,
Mhm.
where Zoom isn't necessarily as convenient. So,
Is there anything important here about, I mean, I know you talked about some of these already about during the interview,
no, I think
went
I think
through
we
that.
covered it.
Okay.
Oh, if you're
Oh,
going to take notes, and I do think that it's certainly okay to take notes in an interview, and I encourage it, make sure that you ask. Um, if you're, it's particularly on Zoom, if you're down writing like this, an interviewer isn't necessarily going to know what you're doing. And so I would let them know that you'd like to take notes. And it's also a good idea to prepare questions always
oh,
for
yes.
the interviewer.
Mhm.
And the last thing you want to do when that question comes up is say, I don't have any questions for
Right,
you.
right.
You want to think about different questions that you can ask. You can bring them in written down on paper. And
Mhm.
when they ask you, do you have any questions? Yeah, I thought about this ahead of time and I wrote a few down just so I wouldn't forget.
Yeah, awesome. I think that makes you sound strong.
Yep.
And then, as you said, do the thank you note, reflect on what went well, what didn't, and then the follow-up. Um, so then our last subject, I think, is about college majors. And, um, you know, it, do college majors matter? And you and I have different, I think we both agree, but we
Yeah.
come from different perspectives on this, and it totally depends on the industry and all that. But why don't you talk about when college majors do matter?
Sure. So I think you talked about the big fields before. So certainly for the highly specialized fields, you're talking about engineering, computer science, medicine, certainly some areas of finance. A relevant major is a prereq. And not only is it a prereq, but it's a prereq to get the internships that lead you to the jobs. So
Hmm.
that's when they matter more. There are some grad schools that certainly require majors ahead of time for an entrance and some licensing and certifications. So for those types of things, if you need a certification for a psych degree, if you're going to be into clinical, then you would want that major. For others, not so much. So did you have anything to add to that slide?
No, I agree with you. And I was just thinking from, so my daughter, who was interested in biology, and she was interested in public health. Like she knew that because of her extracurricular activities in college and the epidemiology and all this. But she also knew through researching public health that even if you're a doctor, you have to have a master's in public health in order to do things in public health. So, um, you know, and my son ended up becoming a physical therapist, and he had to get his doctorate. So there are certain fields where if you want to do it, if you want to be a nurse, you have to be a licensed nurse.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. But for other fields, like consulting,
Hmm.
marketing, business development, and some technology roles, they prioritize your experience over the specific degree. And what I mean by that is, so it's a twofold answer, right? So some companies will come in and recruit for certain majors, but others will look at it and they just want somebody who is a problem solver, somebody who's a thinker, and they will take that person on as an intern. So while they may not have the major, they have the experience. And
Yeah.
so that's when it doesn't matter as much. Now, if you're at a school that doesn't have some of those business classes, like marketing, they don't have a business
Hmm.
major, there's a number of companies that will hire students, particularly at the intern level, that don't have that exposure and teach that. So it just depends. But in those cases, it doesn't matter as much. And overall, again, I want to emphasize employers are looking for beyond your major in general. They're looking at the skills that you develop, the experience that you have, and the projects that you've done and how they align with the work that they are looking to have accomplished.
So then, you've been talking about the transferable skills. So why don't you just go through these
Sure.
ones here?
Yeah. Yep. Again, I mentioned communication skills, excuse me, as I communicate poorly. So both oral and written communication skills are really important. And in particular, people are thinking all of that is going away because of AI. It is not. It's more important than ever. And because of the pandemic, computer or communication skills were a bit of a lost art form.
Hmm.
And so it's even more important if you're lacking in those things to work on it. Critical thinking and problem solving. I know Mary Pat mentioned it before. Companies want people who solve problems. They
Hmm.
hire people because they have a problem and they want it solved. End of story. Teamwork and collaboration are super important. Time management, adaptability and flexibility, which hopefully, after all of the things that everybody's gone through, they've adapted some adaptability and flexibility skills. Technical skills, even non-technical jobs I'm seeing these days are requiring Python. They're requiring some of that exposure. So if your student isn't able to get that in college, again, I mentioned there are things like Coursera and Udemy
Hmm.
where they can pick those up. Interpersonal skills, another one that is highly sought after and not everybody has it. And so developing interpersonal skills is really important for just about any job these days. Research skills, and hopefully they're gaining some of those research skills both in high school and in college, but certainly through project work and through internships and part-time jobs, hopefully that's being picked up as well. And creativity and innovation. So kind of hand in hand with problem solving, they need people who are creative and innovative.
Yep. Um, and I'm sure, a lot of high school students, if they're listening to this, might be thinking, well, how I'm in high
Right.
school, but
Yep.
this is a great list that you created of how teens can develop these skills. Again, and the thing I always say about skills, the more you do something, the better your skills get. So these are
Yeah.
that previous slide, those are things, parents, it's like I had to teach my kids how to do laundry, okay? Like,
Right.
they're,
Yeah.
but think print that list off and create maybe brainstorm with other parents as to how things you can do to teach those skills. But a lot of it is are things in the classroom that can help too.
Absolutely. Your group projects, your extracurriculars, taking on leadership roles, even on a group project, a leadership role can give you a lot of
And leadership doesn't always mean you have to be the boss. There's different
no.
ways of showing leadership.
That's right. That's exactly right. Part-time work,
Hmm.
internships, volunteering. I know we've talked about all of these before. Creating a portfolio, and again, coursework and certifications. There's a lot of different certifications out there that you can get, even through, certainly through companies as well. They have their own specialties that they're looking for. So, in developing those skills, you can even think about things that you've done, and if you're not quite sure how to extract that kind of, you can type in a paragraph about what you did and ask ChatGPT,
Hmm.
what skills did I learn by doing this? Because it may not be obvious to you what
Hmm.
skills you're really developing. And then you can have an aha moment. Oh, I actually do have some of these things in my toolkit.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love using ChatGPT for those type of things. Okay, so in summary, we hope parents can help their teens have fun with this process because it's fun, it's exciting to learn about yourself. And as we said earlier, learning what someone doesn't want to do is just as important as learning what is your path. But make things very small and bite sized. Don't be like, okay, kid, here's this big
Right.
overwhelming thing. So like, okay, let's think of what's one possible thing that
Right.
interests you. And then parent, you can say, okay, I've got three different people, and maybe your child, and they might say, okay, I'll talk to Aunt Lorraine, type thing,
Yes.
and whatever. Um, but do let the student control the process. And I realize that you might say, well, then my child will do nothing. So then you might have to, do something. But this isn't, as a parent, as much as we might want our kids to have a certain path, we're here to support and guide. I can tell you my husband begged our daughter to be do something in computer
Right.
science, and that wasn't her thing. Now, does she use computer science in her job? Absolutely, type
Yeah.
thing. But let the student control the process. And as I said earlier at the beginning, this recording will be sent out along with a list of resources, including the slides. So here's Nicole's information. Nicole, you want to give a, like a 30-second commercial on what you can offer
Oh,
families?
sure. But just getting back to that, I want parents to be cautious about, just piggybacking on what you were saying. You can never want something for your student more than they want it for themselves.
Hmm.
Because when you do that and you push, that's when it becomes that challenging situation. So just like Mary Pat said, enjoy the process and be a guide, but they'll figure it out, and it is overwhelming. So bite size is really important. So what I do is I work with young people, whether they're in high school, in college, post-college, and early in career. And I do everything from helping them find and identify a path to helping them with their job search, helping them create resumes and collateral, and helping them with adapting and learning interview skills, and then certainly with mock interviews. So I have, a lot of free information that I post on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and on Facebook. So certainly check some of those out because some of the topics I dive a little bit deeper into.
Great. Thanks, Nicole.
Mhm.
And then I always want families to know that I'm a community resource. I'm easily found. You can just email me at findyourfit@lwsf.org. I'm always happy to answer quick questions. I love it when I get emails with questions. You can follow Find Your Fit and the Lake Washington Schools Foundation on Facebook and Instagram. That's where you can find out about upcoming events. I have two coming up next week, next Wednesday. There's one on exploring the differences between international and U.S. universities. And then the following week is a guide for middle school parents to understand what the transition to high school will be. And these are free. Thank you for everybody who made a donation tonight. Just know that 100% of your donation goes to the foundation's programs and the grants that they fulfill. None of it goes to me, none of it goes to Nicole. We're just volunteers. So, and then that leads us to questions, if there are any. Sorry, we went 10 minutes over, but I think we had a lot of good information here. So let's see, are there? I think I'm going to stop sharing here. There we both are. Let's see, there's a question here. Okay, how do you guide without lecturing when they are young teens? And is this topic really on their radar? Their radar is making new friends and exploring freedom. And I get it. What do you have to say there? Nicole, I'll start with you.
Well, I think that's totally fair. I think giving them information and having a discussion, maybe, don't make a big thing of it. Do it when it's casual and just say, hey, have you ever thought about this? Or what are your thoughts on your future as far as exploring some interests? So make it a non-scary thing. Don't make it so demanding. And if they're
Yeah,
not
or
ready,
dramatic.
yeah, if they're not ready, they're not ready. I mean, there are some kids that just aren't ready to deal with it. And that's more of a that's more of an issue.
Well, and I guess I would say it again, this is the bite size. Because I think a lot of times kids think, oh, I'm interested. Like my son at one point when middle school, he wanted to be an actor. I think he'd be horrified by my saying that, but he did. And, we supported it. We just said, well, if you're going to do that, you have to make sure that you have a career that supports you because that's, harder to make money. And so we talked about, well, you're really good at day and, or if there is I don't know, like, again, making it fun, but if you have, sorry, my husband is vacuuming for some reason. Um, uh, if, let's say they show an interest, I don't know, in aerospace, that's a big topic with a lot of kids. And maybe you have a family friend or a family member over for dinner and you can just kind of like those informational questions that I talked, like just to get the conversation
Yeah.
going. And I mean, and oh my gosh, there are so many wonderful summer programs in our area that kids can do. UW, like kids can take classes at UW in the summertime if they want to, and just learn about like I just always type in things like summer 2025 high school programs in art and design and just see what comes, like, and I don't know, there's lots of ways. Again, you don't want to shove it down their throat, but I can tell you it strengthens the kids who wait until senior year to start thinking about, again, can you get into college? Yes, yes, you can. Can you get into, like UW is kind of like they look and they were like, oh, this kid says they want to do computer science or whatever, and it just helps. I just have seen where it helps. So I feel strongly about it. Um, okay, so my sophomore is doing only clubs like DECA and debate. He's not volunteering and interning. Well, DECA is, I think, a good way to learn more about business. I and Nicole, you can disagree with me. I think DECA is great. It's a great starting point. I don't think it really goes in depth. It's more the competition, like kids are memorizing and doing all that stuff. Debate can be very interesting because you have to be persuasive. Um, and as far as as far as does a sophomore have to have an internship? No, not yet. But again, thinking about who do you know? Because especially for ninth and 10th graders, this is mostly going to be based on who do you know? What kind of connections can you make? But um, as far as volunteering, so if I find a student who, I don't know, let's say they love soccer, okay? All right, and they haven't done any volunteering. I'll say, well, why don't you volunteer to help coach a little kids team? Because that'll give the student leadership experience, like, and they'll learn things through it. And or if as a family, do you have a family value? Perhaps your family values the environment, and you say, okay, well, once a month, we as a family, we are going to go and like there's like the Washington trails. Like, boy, what a great way to learn about engineering because you're working on the trails. Or you say, we're going to go and do a beach cleanup, or and sometimes you gotta go along. You can't expect your kid to do it necessarily by themselves. You might have to do it as a family, but you can't make them do everything, but
Right.
there's a way as parents where you do have some control. And that's why this is important to do now, because once they go off to college, you don't have any control over what they're going to be doing or who they're going to be exploring things with, or and
And if the volunteer work is required for the college application, it's important for them to
it's
understand the
so
consequence.
so in Lake Washington there's no community service hours required. And colleges don't require it, but it's separate from extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
And again, depending on the college, and there's a college tool called College Data that has a scattergram that shows how colleges weigh specific parts of the admissions process. And there are colleges that I've seen where volunteering is weighed more than extracurricular work, but they do differentiate.
Right.
It's not required, but it could be where someone goes, well, that kid doesn't have any, and so it
Yeah.
lessens the strength of their application. So, um,
And there, for a high school student, there is a limited number of hours in a day too. So the messaging that we're giving here, it's choosing some of these activities. They can't do all of those activities at
no,
once.
no, and that's like, and I don't want to get into the whole 6 period thing. I realize it's a big change. And I'm gonna go to the lunch and learn this week to learn more about it. My kids went to East Lake when there was only 6 periods, and they did fine. So, you know, kids can do things outside. If there's things that they're interested in, they can do it outside of class. Like in summer is a phenomenal time to do things. My poor daughter, I keep talking about her, but in high school, she didn't, she had hard classes and she danced. She was never going to be a professional dancer, but she danced. And your daughter did basketball, right? Like there wasn't a whole lot of time for other things. But in the
Right.
summer, my daughter would do things to explore the sciences, and that made for, and I- you know, I think there's a way to let kids, again, they don't have to be doing 40-hour a week, but you can say, you know what, we expect you to do, I don't know, 5 hours a month of some sort of volunteer. Either you get to pick it, or, or I get to pick
Right.
it, or, I don't know. Some of this is parenting stuff. Um, if I switch my fields in high school, do I need to restart my extracurriculars? No, no, I mean, your extracurriculars are your extracurriculars. That doesn't change. There is nothing wrong with an extracurricular because there's only so many hours in the day. As students go through high school, typically their coursework gets harder. They take more AP classes, things like that. And there's only so many hours in the day. So sometimes students have to quit doing things, and
Mhm.
that's okay. So and like Nicole was saying, you might have been interested in, I don't know, let's say theater, and then you switched to, I don't know, biology or something. The skills you learned in the theater stuff, you can still apply those skills. The skills haven't gone away. It's just how you use them might be slightly
Focus.
different, but
Yep.
you should be proud of them. Um, okay, I'm not getting into running. You guys, this is an exploring careers, not running start. Uh, Okay, anytime my son mentions his career interests, my spouse voices concern over how much the career pays. Is taking a more general major with perhaps a minor or concentration better? Nicole, you work more with salaries and all that than I do, so.
So they're asking if taking something with a major and a minor is better
Well, it
than,
sounds like what the son might be interested in,
yeah,
perhaps the other parent doesn't feel like they would make a living. And I gotta say, I do feel bad for our children who are growing up here in Seattle because the cost of living is so high here. It's not
yeah,
high in other parts of the United, like, and again, and I can say this as a parent, neither of my kids live here,
yeah.
because of
No,
that.
it's really hard. Um,
So
so the
anyways,
answer is not a clean answer. It's more the major and minor is great. Having the major be, so I don't know what field they're interested in, but the major doesn't necessarily play the biggest role in the opportunity. Again, it's more what do you do with your college
mhm,
experience? What do you do with your high school experience? What kind of experience are you bringing to the table? So if they've leveraged that major to get certain opportunities, it's great, but it doesn't have to be the major. So for example, my daughter was a CS minor and an economics major, and her work largely involves CS now. She was not a
mhm,
CS major. So, but she worked her butt off in college to get the right opportunities for what she wanted to do because she was focused on it. So
mhm,
I don't think the major has it, and without having specifics, it's hard for me
yeah,
to.
yeah. And as we said, what a ninth grader or 10th grader might think can be very different as they learn more. And then, you know, by the time, and it's more of a direction for those reasons that we talked about. But it's not like I know 100% this is my path, because I
That's
don't I
right.
don't know that most teens can do that. So,
Most people won't even start on the same path post-college that they stay on. They're building again. So you may think that your career is going to go one direction. And again, I was talking about how you've got turns. So it's a
okay,
starting point.
yeah. So somebody said their daughter decided to do engineering, but the child is having a hard time with AP physics and getting good grades. Should she change this major?
So is
If
she,
if you're talking about a B, I wouldn't. I don't know what, when
yeah,
people talk generically, I don't know what grades we're talking about. Um, you know, I always say, finding out, do you have a tutor? Are you talking to the teachers? Are you doing study groups? Being proactive. Um, I, my son, when he took AP, Calculus AB the first semester, I was notified, I don't know how many times, your child is failing, your child is failing, your child, and my kids, that I'd never experienced that before. And he was very good at math, but he was having a really hard time. And I kept trying to get him all these things to support him. And he said to me, I want to do this myself. This is really, I will figure it out. I don't want that support. And I was like, okay. And he figured it out and he turned it around. And I think he ended up like maybe with a C minus or something the first semester, but he had an A by the end, second semester, and he got a 5 on the AP exam. So colleges can see that. And on college applications, there's places you can explain situations. Um, if I would say if your child absolutely hates, it's one thing if they're challenged by a subject, but if they absolutely despise a subject, I would worry with physics and engineering because it's such an important
Right.
principle. Because that's a lot of, and engineering is a very difficult subject matter in college. It's very challenging. I've had students who were all A's in high school and that's not the case in college when they're an engineer. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, I guess just make sure, but if your child is still really interested, I would just do what you can to support them, you know?
And there are cases where it's just a struggle the first time around
Yeah,
and then it clicks. But if there's a despising the subject going on, that's a
yeah.
little different.
Especially for something that's so critical to
Yeah.
subject. So, okay. Let's see. Let's see. Um, my son wants to take up business, thinking it's much easier than doing computer science. Computer science doesn't intrigue him. Unlike both his IT parents. Oh, his kids are like, no, 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 no. Should he apply for a major in business? Can he do CS later if he doesn't align with business? Um, so computer science, as I said earlier, and Nicole said the same thing, is going to be part of pretty much every field. Um, I think as someone who doesn't know the basics of computer science is going to be challenged. And there's computer science oriented majors in business programs. Um, and no one should think business is easier because a lot of business, again, it depends. You can have business administration, which is a little bit more broad, and then you can have, finance and
Yeah.
internet. Like there's so many different um, majors within a business school. It depends on the college.
It,
Um,
it
but
does.
math is really important. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, a lot of the careers right now, because CS is such a tight job market. I mean, it's really tight. A lot of the CS people are getting hired in business capacity. So banking is where a lot of CS kids are going right now.
Hmm.
So, there's value in both. And as far as the specifics on being able to switch, it really depends on the college.
Yeah. Um, and I know, so when I was in college, I was a communications major, but I minored in business. Again, this is 40 years ago. But I can tell you when I was interviewing for jobs, companies appreciated the fact that I understood business. And my son, when he was in getting his doctorate program, because a lot of physical therapists start their own practices, and so there was a class on that, and he was shocked because he had minored in business, and he said, "Oh my God, like these people didn't know anything about business." So I think knowing about business, whether it's your major or your minor, can be important skills to have, but that's my bias, I'll say. So anything you want to add to that, Nicole?
No,
No.
I think we covered it.
Okay. Okay, so community colleges have the same requirements. Oh, no. Community colleges or like Washington Institute of Technology, no, they do not have the same requirements. And personally, I think because so many students don't think about what they want to make, they're kind of lost. And a community college is a great way to get prerequisites taken care of. You can get what's known as direct transfer agreements on business or computer science or nursing, all these different things. I know a lot of families want their students to get into UW Seattle. Again, there's a lot of great schools in the area. But if they don't get in, I'll tell you what, going the community college route, earning an associate degree, doing well in those classes. And I've had students who have gone that route and are shocked at the high quality of teaching that is at the community college, because community college professors tend to teach there because they love to teach. It's not so much the research and the politics of a tenured professor at, UW or somebody like that. So I think community college and the cost savings that a family can get to from that. And it can give kids a time to figure things out, get more experience to apply to the Foster School of Business or Paul Allen, computer science school and all that stuff. Um, my sophomore has no clear interest, has not started any extracurriculars. I'm worried that we're losing time. What can I do to improve her chances? Well, the most important thing is always, are they doing well in school? Are their grades? That's very critical. Um, Again, everybody's different. If I guess I would ask your child, well, what do you enjoy doing? Like, and maybe they can get a do not, part-time jobs are powerful. I worked in high school. Did you work in high school, Nicole?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you learn, boy, you want to talk to, those transferable skills.
Right.
When you got a crabby boss or whatever or time
Yeah.
management skills, because you got to show up on time or all this stuff, and maybe again, you make it, okay, this is a family policy. You're required to pick an activity that you want to participate in school or a volunteer. Like, again, this is where parents do have a little control over the
Yeah.
situation, whereas you won't have it later on. So, um,
And maybe it's because the activities that are immediately coming to mind are social. Maybe this child doesn't really want to do something super
yes,
social. So
yeah.
there's a lot of options that we discussed tonight that wouldn't be so pressury in that way.
Mhm.
So, and there's a lot of part-time jobs that don't have to be as overwhelming if that's the
Yeah.
case. Again,
And,
I'm not sure
and
what the case is,
yeah,
but
and I know when we think about extracurriculars, we often think about high school, the things at the high school. I gotta tell you, because I talk to a lot of high school students, it can be very competitive in these
yeah.
high school environments. And no offense to these kids, but there are kids that I call loud leaders, and and they kind of terrorize some of the other kids, the more quieter kids. And these kids are like because they can't, if they volunteer, you don't get to do it. I get to do it because it's going on my college application and blah blah blah. But there's lots of things outside of the high school, lots of activities, or again, creating your own. I remember I had a student who loved writing, just loved writing. And so she and a girlfriend, uh, they created a summer writing camp in their little neighborhood for little kids, like for, like second graders or and they liked teaching kids how to write and create stories and do all this stuff. I had another kid who did like a little robotics thing in his garage, charged some money, made these little, oh my God, it's just the experience. And then again, brainstorm, have fun with it. Be like, like toss the ball. Okay, your turn to come up with an idea. Okay, your turn to just, I, there's no one way, but I would encourage, and again, I don't want no one should ever do anything to look good to a college. That is fake and artificial, and it's going to go nowhere. Tell the child, I'm encouraging you to do this because of what you learn about yourself. And self people who are self-aware are the most successful people that there are, because they know what they're good at, they know what they're not good at, they know what they like, and there's nothing wrong with trying something out, doing it once and being like, "Mm, not going back for that one." Be
Yep.
polite, but there's nothing wrong with it. And I think there's again, I don't want it to be a shove down the throat, you must do this, but it's like eating healthy food, you know? I mean, if left to their own devices, a lot of kids probably wouldn't, you know, but I don't know. You have a lot of experience with your own kids, Nicole. Any advice there?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think explaining what the consequences are, and I think a lot of times young people, because of their development, don't realize that it does matter, right? And so they think, well, that's way far away, and really, it's not far away. So I think really having an adult conversation about it's not far away, and not a combative conversation.
Hmm.
But it's hard. It's overwhelming to think about what do you want to do? Why aren't you interested in doing anything? Have them do one of those assessments. It takes 10
Hmm.
minutes
Yeah,
online.
yeah,
So if they're completely thinking, well, I'm not interested in anything, have them do an assessment to get some dialogue going, get them
hmm,
thinking about it. Because, even adults, if I'm asked all the time, well, what's your hobby? Well, I don't really have a hobby. I work out, but I don't have
hmm,
a hobby.
hmm.
And sometimes you feel almost like, oh, what's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with not having a hobby. There's nothing wrong with not knowing what you want to
Yeah.
do. You just might need some guidance in figuring it out.
Well, and one thing I would say about having your child do an assessment, and I know this might be tough because sometimes as parents we think we know our kids really well, but like so I do interest in skills assessments with students, and I always say the reason I can do it is because I'm not their parent. But I find because I when I first started, I would give it to us. I say, here, take it. But I quickly discovered I learned nothing about the student because it was like numbers, and none of us are defined by numbers. But when I started giving it to students, so again, maybe you're not the right person. Maybe there's an older sibling or a cousin or, who can give it. And just having the conversation because they're just statements or questions or things like that. Oh, I'm surprised that you like that. How do like just asking questions and it may lead places. Um, but I just try not to shove, but maybe, and I'm like, I, I don't know. Our daughter was a different child than our son. We wanted Our daughter would do things and she created like, she'd put out flyers and she'd work in the summer and she would dog sit and babysit and drive kids. Like she would do all, she's this guy. Our son, for whatever reason, we told him we wanted him to get a job and, so finally my husband had to say to him, I have failed you as a father. I'm sorry. Because obviously you do not understand the value of money or you don't understand the value of volunteering or whatever. And so we basically said, that credit card that you use to fill up the gas tank, it doesn't work anymore. So you can't, and it was amazing because our son became the hardest working little hustler I've ever like we both who he was when he was like and then having a little incentive of some sort, it made all the difference. And he never would have done that left if we were like, well, he doesn't want to do it, okay, you know. So I don't know. Again, that's just my parenting experience, and my kids are 29 and 27, so they're a little older, but um, it's tough. I'm not saying it isn't, but it's like when, you have to teach them how to potty train and stuff. It's not pleasant, but the end result can be
Right. Right.
is worthwhile, I guess we'll say. So, just keep trying, like, and some things will work and some things don't work. Maybe, do something with another family, where you get two kids together who like, okay, let's brainstorm. What are you guys going to do? And just the experience is worthwhile. So anyways, Nicole, thank you so much for
Thank
giving
you.
your time so generously tonight. I really appreciate it. As I said, we have lots of resources that'll be sent out, but we don't send them out. The foundation does, and it typically takes a week. So thank you for everybody participating and your good questions. I know it's tough. We don't mean to make it sound like it's super easy,
Right. It's
but
not.
it's not, but it's so worthwhile. Remember what I say, them learning about themselves, knowing what they don't want to do. skills that they learn, confidence that gets built. So anyways, thanks for joining us tonight and hope to see you at another Find Your Fit event. Thanks, Nicole. Have a good
Thank
night.
you all. Thank you, Mary Pat. Appreciate the
Bye-bye.
opportunity. Bye.